Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the sterile corridor of Nexus Prime's Galactic Medical Center, holding rejection letter number 847. 2 centuries of applications, 2 centuries of polite but firm dismissals. The crystalline form of Dr. Kethvel, an Etherian administrator, shimmered before her with the cold efficiency that characterized his species. Dr. Chen, his voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that translated into perfect standard galactic. While we acknowledge your adequate qualifications, the Galactic Medical Center requires physicians with sophisticated biological perception capabilities. Humans, unfortunately, lack the neurological complexity necessary for advanced xenobiological medicine. Sarah's weathered hands, 247 years old but kept vital through medical advances, gripped the rejection notice. Behind her calm exterior, frustration burned like a dying star. She had graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Medical School, completed advanced xenobiology training on Titan, and spent 2 centuries treating every known species in the galaxy's most diverse space station. Yet to the medical establishment, she remained primitive. "I understand," she replied, her voice steady despite the decades of identical conversations. "Thank you for your consideration." Dr. Kethvel's crystalline features remained impassive. To Etherians, emotions were inefficient biological responses that clouded judgment. He had no concept of the quiet determination that burned in Sarah's chest, no understanding that her primitive human heart had grown stronger, not bitter, with each rejection. As Sarah walked away through the pristine corridors of the GMC, she passed magnificent medical bays where Etherian physicians diagnosed patients through bioenergy scanning, where six-armed Zephyrian surgeons performed operations with mechanical precision, where telepathic Valdorian doctors sensed illness through mental connection. All of them employed technologies and biological capabilities that humans could never match. Yet Sarah knew something they didn't. She understood that medicine wasn't just about sophisticated sensors or telepathic diagnosis. Sometimes, the most advanced technology missed what simple human observation could catch. The transport pod carried her down 30 levels to the lower district, where the real Nexus Prime revealed itself. Here, among the maintenance workers, dock laborers, and service providers who kept the station running, Sarah operated her small clinic. The walls were painted cheerful colors instead of clinical white, and the waiting area buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. "Dr. Sarah," called out Jorik, her Zalarian nurse and friend of 43 years. His blue-scaled face brightened as she entered. Zalarians were among the galaxy's most empathetic species, and Jorik had chosen to work in the lower district because he believed healing required compassion, not just technology. "How did the meeting go?" Sarah showed him the rejection letter. Jorik's large, dark eyes filled with the kind of gentle sadness that only his species could express. "Their loss," he said softly. "Mrs. Thanari's fever broke this morning, by the way. The Tenthari respiratory treatment you developed worked perfectly." This was why Sarah persevered. In the lower district, she treated species that the GMC considered beneath their notice: immigrant families, elderly aliens without insurance, workers injured in industrial accidents. She had developed treatments for conditions that prestigious medical databases didn't even catalog, simply because she took time to listen to her patients and observe patterns that sophisticated scanners missed. Her afternoon schedule included familiar faces. Young Kesh, a Tenthari child whose lung capacity had improved dramatically under Sarah's care. Elder Vox Thumb, a Vorthan whose bone decay she was treating with a combination of human physical therapy and adapted Valdorian meditation techniques. And Maria Santos, a human colony worker whose radiation exposure Sarah monitored with a careful protocol that combined multiple species detoxification methods. Each patient required Sarah to think beyond the boundaries of single-species medicine. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters and pattern recognizers, traits that seemed primitive to species with telepathy or bioenergy perception. But Sarah had learned to use these evolutionary gifts in medicine. She noticed subtle changes in behavior, breathing patterns, skin coloration across species. She asked questions that seemed irrelevant but revealed important connections between symptoms and lifestyle. As evening approached, emergency klaxons echoed through the lower district. Sarah looked up from her patient files to see Captain Rex Morrison entering her clinic, his weathered face grim with exhaustion. The human freighter pilot had been Sarah's patient for 15 years, ever since a shipping accident had required extensive reconstructive surgery that only her innovative techniques had made successful. "Doc," Rex's voice carried the weight of terrible news. "We've got a problem. A big one." Rex had just returned from the Outer Rim, carrying refugees from a mining colony on Kepler 442b. His ship held 43 survivors from what should have been a thriving research community of over 2,000 beings. "It started 3 days ago," Rex explained as Sarah examined the refugees in her clinic's small emergency bay. "Research Station Gamma 7 went completely dark. No distress signal, no communication, nothing. When the rescue ships arrived, they found the entire facility dead. These folks were the only ones who got out alive, and they're not doing well." Sarah studied the survivors with growing concern. They represented 5 different species: humans, Zalarians, Etherians, Vorthans, and Tentharis, but all showed similar symptoms: mild fever, slight disorientation, and a subtle cellular degradation that her basic scanners could barely detect. "Have they been seen by GMC physicians?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "Tried that first," Rex replied. "Dr. Vexthara himself examined them, ran every test in the book, said they were suffering from stress and malnutrition, prescribed rest and standard nutritional supplements. But Sarah's trained eye saw something different. The refugees' symptoms weren't random stress responses. There was a pattern in the timing, a rhythm in the cellular breakdown that suggested something far more sinister than exhaustion." Within 6 hours, her suspicions proved correct. The first refugee died, a young Zalarian engineer named Kelmox. His cellular structure simply stopped functioning. No obvious cause, no dramatic symptoms, just a quiet systemic failure that defied explanation. Sarah immediately contacted the GMC, requesting permission to perform an autopsy and share her observations. Dr. Kethvel's response was swift and dismissive. "Dr. Chen, the Galactic Medical Center appreciates your concern, but this matter is being handled by qualified xenobiological specialists. Your primitive diagnostic methods are not required." By morning, 3 more refugees had died. The pattern was becoming clearer to Sarah, even as it apparently remained invisible to the GMC's sophisticated sensors. Each victim experienced the same progression: fever, disorientation, cellular breakdown, death within 72 hours. More troubling, the cellular damage affected different organ systems in each species, but always in ways that seemed specifically targeted to that species' biology. The GMC mobilized their most advanced resources. Dr. Vexthara, the station's chief of medicine and one of the galaxy's most respected Etherian physicians, personally oversaw the investigation. Bioenergy scans revealed nothing unusual. Telepathic probes found no mental disturbance. Molecular analysis showed cellular damage but no identifiable pathogen. The station's quantum-level AI diagnostics, capable of detecting biological anomalies at the subatomic level, found no matching disease profiles in their databases. Sarah watched the medical establishment's response with growing frustration. She knew they were looking in the wrong direction, but every attempt to share her observations was rebuffed. When she suggested that the disease might not be biological in nature, Dr. Vexthara's crystalline features literally sparkled with disdain. "Dr. Chen," he said during one particularly tense meeting, "we have scanned these patients with instruments capable of detecting quantum-level biological irregularities. If our technology cannot identify the pathogen, it certainly cannot be diagnosed through primitive human sensory observation." But Sarah's primitive observations had revealed something the sophisticated scanners missed. She had spent hours talking to the refugees, learning about their experiences on Research Station Gamma 7. More importantly, she had noticed that the disease didn't spread randomly. Infection seemed correlated with specific activities and exposures that the victims had experienced before leaving the research station. As the death toll mounted and panic spread through Nexus Prime's 40 million inhabitants, Sarah continued her unauthorized investigation. Working with Captain Morrison and a small group of allies in the lower district, she gathered information that the GMC's protocols hadn't even considered relevant. Research Station Gamma 7, she learned, hadn't been a simple mining facility. It was a classified military research installation where humans and aliens collaborated on defensive technologies. The project involved developing new types of quantum resonance weapons designed to disable enemy equipment without harming organic life. Sarah's medical intuition, honed by decades of treating diverse species, began connecting patterns that eluded the GMC's specialized approach. The refugees' symptoms didn't match any known biological pathogen because they weren't dealing with a biological pathogen at all. The cellular damage was too precise, too targeted to specific biological markers. It resembled the theoretical effects of quantum-level technological interference, specifically, the kind of nanoscopic weapons that had been described in classified military research decades earlier. When Sarah presented this theory to the GMC leadership, the response was swift and humiliating. Dr. Vex Thara called an emergency meeting of the medical staff, ostensibly to hear Sarah's proposal, but actually to demonstrate why human diagnostic methods were inadequate. Dr. Chen suggests, his harmonic voice carried clear disdain, that our patients are suffering from some form of technological infection. She proposes that nanoscopic machines, undetectable by our quantum-level scanners, are causing cellular breakdown that mimics biological illness. The assembled physicians, Etherians, Zephyrians, Valdorians, and other advanced species, responded with the academic equivalent of laughter. Their biofocused scanners were designed to detect any foreign technological presence in organic systems. The idea that primitive, human observation could identify something their sophisticated equipment missed was not just wrong, it was scientifically absurd. Furthermore, Dr. Vexthara continued, Dr. Chen has no formal training in quantum-level technological medicine. Her expertise lies in basic xenobiology and what humans call bedside manner, hardly qualifications for addressing a crisis of this magnitude. Sarah left the meeting knowing that the GMC would continue pursuing biological solutions to a technological problem. As she returned to her clinic, she found Jorik waiting with devastating news. Her friend and colleague had contracted the mysterious illness. Watching Jorik deteriorate over the following days was the worst experience of Sarah's long medical career. The Zalarian's natural empathy made him acutely aware of his own decline, and his large eyes carried a quiet understanding that broke Sarah's heart. The GMC doctors could only document his symptoms and offer palliative care. Their most advanced treatments had no effect on the progression of his illness. On the third day of Jorik's infection, as Sarah sat beside his bed in the GMC's critical care unit, she made a decision that would change everything. If the medical establishment wouldn't listen to her theories, she would prove them through action. Working secretly with Captain Morrison and a small network of lower district allies, Sarah began investigating the quantum signatures that her primitive human intuition had detected. Using borrowed equipment and improvised techniques, she analyzed tissue samples from the victims and compared them to quantum resonance patterns from known technological weapons. Her breakthrough came at 3 in the morning in a makeshift laboratory in the lower district. The cellular damage wasn't random. It was precisely targeted to biological markers that indicated cross-species interaction. The nanoscopic weapons were designed to kill anyone who had prolonged contact with multiple alien species, effectively targeting the most integrated, cooperative members of galactic society. The plague was a terrorist attack by the Purist Coalition, a xenophobic organization dedicated to ending human-alien cooperation. They had deployed experimental nanomachines that would eliminate the bridge builders, the translators, the cooperative spirits who made galactic civilization possible. More disturbing, Sarah's investigation revealed that the attack was being aided from within. Dr. Zethkal, an Etherian researcher at the GMC, had been providing false data to the medical teams and mislabeling samples to prevent effective treatment. The Purist Coalition had infiltrated the very institution meant to save lives. As the death toll approached 2,000 and Nexus Prime faced complete societal collapse, Director Quinsaler, the station's Valdorian administrator, finally authorized desperate measures. With Dr. Vexthara's reluctant consent, Sarah was given temporary access to the GMC's resources and 48 hours to implement her treatment protocol. Sarah's solution leveraged humanity's greatest medical strength: adaptability. Instead of seeking one cure for all species, she developed individualized quantum frequency disruptors based on each species' unique biological signatures. The treatment required constant monitoring and real-time adjustment, something that demanded intuition and flexibility rather than rigid protocols. Working with a hastily assembled team that included some GMC doctors who had begun questioning their previous assumptions, Sarah raced against time. The treatment process required the kind of observational medicine that humans had practiced for millennia, watching each patient's response, noting subtle changes, adjusting protocols based on intuitive understanding rather than algorithmic analysis. Dr. Zethkal's sabotage attempt came on the second day of treatment implementation. As Sarah worked frantically to save Jorik and dozens of other patients, the Etherian researcher tried to contaminate the quantum disruptor arrays. Captain Morrison and loyal security forces stopped him in a confrontation that revealed the full scope of the Purist Coalition's infiltration. "You think you're saving them?" Zethkal's crystalline voice carried fanatical conviction as security officers restrained him. "But you're destroying the natural order. Species were meant to remain separate, pure. Your human contamination of galactic society ends here." But the contamination he feared was actually civilization's greatest strength. Sarah's treatment worked precisely because it embraced cooperation across species boundaries. Each successful recovery required combining human adaptability with Etherian energy manipulation, Zephyrian precision, Valdorian empathy, and Zalarian resilience. Jorik was among the first to recover. As the Zalarian's large eyes regained their clarity and his natural empathy returned, he smiled at Sarah with the kind of pure gratitude that made decades of rejection worthwhile. "Dr. Sarah," he whispered, his voice still weak but filled with warmth, "you saved us all." The treatment protocols Sarah developed were transmitted throughout the galaxy, stopping similar Purist Coalition attacks on 6 other stations. The terrorists' plan failed because they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity's role in galactic civilization. Humans weren't contaminants weakening species purity. They were catalysts enabling cooperation that made all species stronger. 6 months after the plague crisis, Dr. Sarah Chen received a very different kind of message from the Galactic Medical Center. Instead of rejection letter 848, Director Quinsaler personally delivered an offer to become chief of xenobiological medicine, heading a new department created specifically to handle multi-species medical challenges. Dr. Vexthara, his crystalline pride finally cracked by undeniable evidence, publicly apologized to Sarah and the galactic medical community. Etherian medical philosophy had become too rigid, he admitted in his formal statement. We had confused technological sophistication with genuine healing. Dr. Chen has taught us that medicine requires more than advanced sensors. It requires the wisdom to observe, adapt, and connect across boundaries we had thought were absolute. The plague crisis led to comprehensive reforms in galactic medical education. Human-style observational medicine became required training for physicians of all species. Sarah established exchange programs where human doctors worked alongside alien physicians, sharing techniques and perspectives that had been artificially separated by prejudice and pride. The clinic in the lower district continued operating, now staffed by a diverse team of species who had learned from Sarah's methods. Jorik became her head nurse at the GMC, bringing his natural empathy to an institution that was slowly learning the value of compassion alongside technological capability. 2 years after the crisis, Sarah received an application that made her smile with deep satisfaction. A young Etherian medical student named Kelvin had submitted a request to study what he called adaptive diagnostic techniques under her supervision. His application letter showed a humility that would have been impossible for an Etherian before the plague crisis. "Dr. Chen," he wrote, "I wish to learn how primitive human observation can detect patterns that our most sophisticated technology misses. My species has much to learn about healing beyond our traditional methods." Sarah wrote back with an acceptance letter, remembering her own 847 rejections. The cycle of prejudice had been broken, replaced by curiosity and cooperation. Young physicians across the galaxy were learning that true medical advancement came not from technological superiority or species-based pride, but from the willingness to learn from others and adapt to new challenges. Standing in her new office in the GMC's tower, looking out at the vast diversity of Nexus Prime's inhabitants, Sarah reflected on humanity's journey from rejected primitives to essential partners in galactic civilization. The universe had finally recognized what she had always known, that humanity's greatest strength lay not in matching other species' specialized abilities, but in building bridges between different ways of thinking, healing, and living. The stars beyond the station's viewports held countless worlds, countless species, countless opportunities for cooperation and mutual growth. And somewhere among those stars, Sarah knew other humans were fighting their own battles against prejudice and misunderstanding, using the same tools that had always defined their species: adaptability, persistence, and the unshakable belief that diversity makes everyone stronger. The plague had been defeated not by advanced technology or superior biology, but by the simple human understanding that healing, like all the best things in life, works best when different minds and hearts work together toward a common goal.